While the Jorge Soler trade makes sense for 2024, it does raise some questions about 2025 where things could be pretty crowded with Ozuna and Acuna coming back. We'll answer that question and many more on today's Mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast at LockedOn_Braves. Subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button so others can find us. And if you're listening on the audio version, please leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. If you're an everydayer, let me know down in the comment section below. Appreciate hearing from you there. And make sure, again, that you hit that thumbs up button to help support us here at Locked On Braves. And thank you so much for all your support here and making us your first listen of each and every day. A lot of great podcasts out there, a lot of great Braves podcasts. So anytime you tune into mine, I am very appreciative. Now, today is our mailbag episode, a little bit earlier in the week. This week, as I'm going to be on vacation the rest of the weekend. So I'll be answering your questions that were submitted on social media. The way you do that, I send a post from LockedOn_Braves asking for questions. You reply to that post with your question to be answered on our weekly mailbag episode. You got a lot of good questions talking about what the situation looks like in 2025 with Soler, Acuna, and Ozuna all needing spots in the DH spot in particular. We'll also discuss, do the Braves have a chance at the division? Things starting to tighten up a little bit there. We'll discuss that and so much more on today's mailbag episode. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's jump into the questions here. As usual, got a lot to get to. That you have submitted some great questions once again, as you always do each and every week. First one from Kelnick's Boomstick said, this is an interesting question. I don't know. Would you rather go to the All-Star game at Truist Park in 2025 or possible Hall of Fame ceremony induction for Andrew and Billy Wagner? This is a tough one for me because I've never been to an All-Star game and they don't come around very often, but I've also never been to the Hall of Fame. And that's obviously something that I have to mark off my bucket list at some point. Andrew Jones, one of my favorite Braves players of all time. As you know, if you listen to the podcast, I very much am a defensive-minded person. That's why, Andrelton Simmons, Rafael Furcal, some of my favorite Braves players. Andrew Jones right up there as well. And I do believe Andrew should be in the Hall of Fame, and hopefully that does happen next year. I think I have to go All-Star game, though. I am going to try very hard to get to the All-Star game and at least go to the Home Run Derby, even though the All-Star game itself, I honestly just haven't really watched much of the last several years. One, just because it's a meaningless game. It's really just seeing the best players. And, I'm fortunate enough I have MLB TV. I watch those players every night. It is a cool just kind of spectacle and event. The Home Run Derby is the one that's probably more entertaining to me. And I'm still a little bitter about them taking the All-Star game away from us in 2021 when they had a chance to do a big Hank Aaron celebration and they missed out on that opportunity. And I need to let that go, just like I need to let that 1-0 White Sox loss go. But it still kind of pains me a little bit. But I think I would choose the All-Star game. There's no guarantee that Andrew's going to get in. Billy Wagner, I love Billy Wagner, don't get me wrong, but he was here, a year, I think. But Andrew is the one that obviously I'd get more emotionally attached to, would love to see that. And I want to get to the Hall of Fame, but the All-Star game comes around once every 20 to 25 years. So I think I would certainly rather go to the All-Star game, but let me know what you would think or what you would do. I think that's a great question. Now, this one from Andrew Campbell, who I was discussing with on social media on Wednesday, says, with the Phillies struggling in a tough 10-day West Coast trip ahead, the Braves are poised to make a move to catch and overtake the division lead with 4 at home against Miami, 3 versus Milwaukee, and 4 at Colorado. Do you think this is the run the Braves do it and climb back in the first? They're not going to climb back in the first over this stretch, but I do believe that if they are going to make a push for the division, and that's still a big if in my mind. They're 6.5 games back with 2 months to go, and just for comparison's sake, I went back and looked at where they were at the end of July in 2022 when they were trying to track down the Mets, and they were only 3 games back of the Mets entering July. Now, as Grant pointed out on the postcast, that season, it kind of, the Braves got close, the Mets pulled away, and that kind of thing until the Braves finally caught up with them in the second to last series of the year when they had to sweep them. And the Braves still have 7 games left against the Phillies. I feel like you're going to have to win 5 of those, and that's a very, very tall task, although they've won both their series against the Phillies this year already. But Andrew's right. If the Braves are going to get back in a position to win the division, this next 10-day stretch here is going to be the time where they can do that. You get through this 10-day stretch where you got 4 against the Marlins, you got 4 against the Rockies, playing the Brewers in between that, a series that they just won in Milwaukee. You come out of that looking really good. You win, 8, 9 of those games, and the Phillies struggle on the road and continue. It's been a little bit of a struggle for them lately, and you get this thing to within 3, 4 games, and you got a couple of series left with them, then yeah, there's a chance. But for me, if I'm the Braves, and I'm hoping this is the case, I'm not looking at division standings. I'm not even looking at what the Phillies are doing. We have not seen this Braves team play good enough baseball consistently this year to even really be thinking about anything other than how do I play good baseball consistently for week-long stretches. I mean, right now we're all excited because they've won 4 of their last 5. Flashback to a week ago after that brutal loss in New York, followed up by an ugly loss that Friday night, and we're all thinking this team is dead. I went back and looked at my headline from last week, and I had in the headline, is this team dead? And now, a week later, after winning 4 or 5, we're all, this team is back. The offense is back. It's just, I need to see more than a 4 to 5 game sample size of this team and this offense in particular being able to put together some really good stretches before I can even really think about what they might be able to do in the division. But this is, Andrew's absolutely right. This is the stretch. Philly's got a tough 10-game West Coast trip. Braves have a pretty favorable stretch coming up with 4 against the Marlins and 4 against the Rockies. And you're hoping to get Max Fried and Ronaldo Lopez back into the rotation. Your offense seems to be coming to life a little bit. Again, small sample size, last 4 or 5 games. But if all those things happen and they have a good stretch here, I could see them getting it to within 3 or 4 games, and then you do have a chance in the last month and a half to really make a run at it. But again, I'm not quite there yet. I'm not going to get too excited yet. I need to see this team play good, consistent baseball for long stretches. I need to see them come back home and take care of a Marlins team that just gutted their entire roster. We haven't seen the Braves. We've seen the Braves play good against good teams this year, as they just did against the Brewers, and then being able to split a series against the Mets, who are playing really good baseball. They've played well against good teams. It's the bad teams that they should be beating that they've really struggled with against this year. So, they come home 4 games against the Marlins. You at least win that series, if not sweep it. And then I'll start feeling a little bit better about this team's chances. But I really need to just see them play good baseball for 2 weeks. We haven't seen that since the beginning of the season. And I want to see that first from the Braves before I start thinking about the division or anything else. Look, the Braves are closer to not being in the postseason than they are to winning the division. So I think you really got to focus on that first. Julie Craig, do you think it was a mistake to trade Contreras or Langeliers for Murphy? Murphy is good defensively, but his bat is awful. I think that's unfair to say that Sean Murphy's bat is awful. He was the best catcher in baseball the first half of last year. He was hurt, banged up the second half of the season, went into a 50-50 split that I don't think really helped him all that much. And obviously the bat was not good down the stretch. He gets injured the first game of this season, misses 2 months, and then he comes back and, he's having to work in a timeshare with Travis d'Arnaud. And there's another question in here about the catcher situation that I want to get into, but I think it's unfair to say that his bat is awful. And his bat has been pretty good for the most part over the last month or so. Since coming back from the All-Star break, I think he's been on base 2 times in just about every game that he's played since the All-Star break, where both catchers have been really good. Now, to say, was it a mistake to trade Contreras? I think Langeliers was actually in the Matt Olson deal. Look, I liked Contreras, and you can go back and listen to my podcast from that season. I said, Contreras, I think the defense is getting better. Now, is it Sean Murphy? Like, he doesn't have, the arm of a Sean Murphy. And I think Sean Murphy has done a fantastic job calling games lately here for Bryce Elder, Grant Holmes, Spencer Schwellenbach. You think about those outstanding outings. That was all Sean Murphy behind the plate. So Sean Murphy does a lot of great things for you. But Contreras, one of the best offensive catchers in baseball. And again, I think he was making strides defensively. I think you can make the case that trade, whether you want to say it's a mistake or not, I don't know that it was necessary. I think is maybe the best way to put it. You had Contreras under team control for a while, pretty cheap, and you go and get a guy, Murphy. And I think the thought process was there that stolen bases were going to become this huge thing with the new rules, and you want to get somebody that has one of the best arms in baseball. And I understand that. But you had a really good young catcher in Contreras who you knew the bat was going to play, and I thought was getting better defensively. So I think, again, mistake seems like a harsh word. I think maybe unnecessary is probably the more accurate word to put on that trade. I don't know that it was necessary to make that trade. It was maybe overthinking things a little bit. But I like Sean Murphy. I do. I'm very much a Sean Murphy advocate, but he's had some really tough luck here with injuries, and Travis d'Arnaud is just good, and he needs that playing time because Travis d'Arnaud is producing right now and performing. We got more questions about the catcher situation that we'll talk about lately. We'll also get into that crowded outfield DH situation for next season and what that could look like. We'll discuss that here next. I love sports, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But right now, in the middle of summer, it is just a baseball season as we all gear up and get ready for football. But baseball gives you something every single night. It's why I love baseball so much. And at FanDuel, they're hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And like I said, with Major League Baseball, you're getting something daily the rest of the way. And you look at FanDuel.com/lockedon, you navigate over to the MLB tab. They have batter props out there, first inning props, Ohtani props. They also have league winners, division winners out there. And let's just scroll on over to the awards winners and look at the NL Cy Young favorite right now. And it is Chris Sale. He's down to -115. Zach Wheeler's had a bit of a tough stretch. He's dropped down to the third best odds with Paul Skeens right there with the second best odds at +200 as Paul Skeens wins the NL Cy Young after not playing for the first couple months. I'll be a little upset, but Chris Sale is a pretty heavy favorite right now for the National League Cy Young. He had another great start on Wednesday. Unfortunately, couldn't get out of that 6th, or he would have gotten his 14th win of the season. But you can check out all that out at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. If you haven't already, make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you, bringing you the biggest stories from all the major sports. Find it on YouTube or in the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Now, this will be the last podcast for the week. We had a lot earlier in the week with the trade deadline. Go back and give those a listen if you haven't already, but you probably already have because those videos were doing great. Thank you so much for all the support there and watching all our trade deadline coverage. Sorry, we didn't do more for you, at least in terms of the Braves not making more deals, but I appreciate all your support in watching those videos, hitting that thumbs up button. Again, it does mean a lot when you do that. Let's jump back into these questions here. And Mordecai Hayduk says, how the 25 draft international prospects looking? So I haven't seen any of the guys from the 25 draft be assigned yet, but we could see some of that happening very soon. I'm looking forward to getting my eyes on some of those. The international prospects, Luis Quinipa struggled a little bit since making the jump to full season ball. John Gill's actually been the better of the two prospects so far at Augusta. Jose Perdomo, he hasn't really gotten a lot of time at the DSL yet. So those are three of the main international prospects that I've been watching for. So we'll keep an eye out on those guys. Again, I can't wait to see where some of those 25 draft guys get assigned. Or I guess I don't know if you meant 24 draft or you're trying to look ahead for the 25 draft international prospects. I'm sorry. I think I messed that question up, but I have not even begun to look to next year just quite yet. So we'll get into that more once we get closer to January when the international signing will be. And as we get ready for the college baseball season, we'll start looking for the 25 draft. But Drew says, what is the expectation from Merrifield, both defensively and offensively? What are we hoping for? What we're hoping for is good defense. He talked about it, that second base is where he feels most comfortable. It's where he's won, Gold Glove in the past. So I'm hoping for really good defense from Whit Merrifield, even at, 35 years old. Offensively, I'm looking for a guy that can, put the ball in play, get on base, steal some bases. That's what I'm hoping for with Whit Merrifield, a guy that can be really one of those guys that I was hoping we would get at the trade deadline, somebody that's more contact oriented, somebody that can get on base, somebody that has some speed to steal. That's my hope for Whit Merrifield, that he can be that guy at the bottom of the order and kind of set the table for the top. So that is my hope for Whit Merrifield. Scott B., do we know anything about the players to be named later or cash involved and in the Luis Guillorme trade with the Angels? We do not. I have not heard anything on that. I feel like usually when that's the case, it just means that cash was sent in the deal. I feel like that should have already been resolved. I felt like those had to get resolved before the trade or before the MLB draft. But I have not heard anything on that or the resolution of it. Tom Lansdale, what does taking on all this salary, Soler and Jackson, do to the Braves salary cap situation? So I, like many others, thought the Jorge Soler move meant that they'd be over that third luxury tax threshold. But according to Alex Anthopoulos, who, he has the actual numbers, he knows what they're paying these guys. He says they're not, and that they plan not to go over that third luxury tax threshold. So that means, they are under it, which means, they don't have to pay the big tax. They don't have to lose the draft or push their draft spot back 10 spots next year. So right now, it looks like they're able to stay under that. I think the Soler contract maybe is a little bit more complex than just appears when looking at it, and the amount of money that's due to him this year and maybe in the following years. I believe there's a big signing bonus in there that maybe threw some people off. But again, according to Alex Anthopoulos, who is the general manager of the Braves, they still are under that third luxury tax threshold. The question for me will be, will they go into the luxury tax again? Because you do it for a third year, those taxes become much, much more significant. So it'll be interesting. We'll talk about it in the offseason. Are the Braves going to go into the tax for that third straight year, which comes with very heavy penalties? But again, we'll discuss that more in the offseason. But for now, for this year, they remain under that third luxury tax threshold, which is $277 million. Ecuadorman says, Jake, people talk about Harris and Albies coming back, but both of them weren't even that good before they got hurt. Isn't it kind of presumptuous to think when they get back, it's all good? It's a good point. That's a great point. Michael Harris, hasn't been very good this year. Ozzie Albies been kind of up and down. I really worry more about Ozzie Albies because, he's coming back with 2-3 weeks, although the timeline there is pushing up. Alex Anthopoulos talking about it yesterday that he could be back in the first or second week of September, which would give him a little bit more time. But Michael Harris, a key one there. The thing I will say, though, Ecuadorman, is that when those guys come back, you can put them 6th, 7th in the order. And it's not as much pressure now, I think, on them when they come back because you have Soler, Riley, Ozuna, hopefully Olsen, the catchers. Those guys seem to be going pretty well. A lot can change between now and when they actually do come back. But you can kind of ease those guys in at the bottom of the order, really lengthen it. And, I do think they're upgrades over what you currently have out there, over a platoon situation between Duvall and Rosario and over what, you're going to get from Whit Merrifield. I do think even Ozzie and Michael Harris, lessened versions of them, are better than that. And they bring some speed to this lineup, which is much needed. You look at this lineup right now, there is just no speed up and down. So I think just having those guys back and having that element back will be big for this lineup. So I get your point, and it is very valid. Neither one of those guys were exactly tearing the cover off the ball when they went down, but I do think having them back and then having the ability to ease them back in the middle to bottom of the lineup is going to, just lengthen this lineup and give them a chance to kind of get back on track. Large Lars says, does Snit actually play the hot hand at catcher down the stretch? So this was the catcher question I think that I was looking for. And this brings up a big discussion. You listen to me here or you follow me on social, you know how frustrated I get with how they treat Sean Murphy. But let me make this very, very clear, because I see people on social media too. They'll put up Travis d'Arnaud's stat line and say, is this the guy you don't want to play? When I'm frustrated with the way that they handle Sean Murphy, it has nothing to do with Travis d'Arnaud. And I think that's what people don't understand. Both guys are good. Both guys can be really good. It's just that Sean Murphy is the guy that you traded for to be the guy. And yet you treat him like a backup when he's playing good. And he's been good. He's been better offensively. We know he's good defensively. He calls a great game. And you treat him like a backup. So like the message that sends, which they don't care what kind of message that sends to the fan base, but the message it sends me as a fan is they don't believe in Sean Murphy. And at least until the last couple of games, they were batting him 8th in the order behind guys like Eddie Rosario and Adam Duvall. How is a fan supposed to take that other than you don't believe in Sean Murphy, this guy that you spent so many resources to go out and get, and 2 years in, you are treating him like a backup and you are batting him 8th in the order behind guys that he should not be batting behind. And he's been playing well. Like I said, I think just about every game since the All-Star break, he's been on base at least twice. So it's not anything against Travis d'Arnaud, who is really hot right now. And d'Arnaud, he has good stretches like this. He had the stretch earlier in the year where he hit 3 home runs in a couple of games stretch, and then he cooled off for a while. It's more so just the optics of the situation and how they treat Sean Murphy, who is supposed to be your guy that you went out and got. He was playing well. He was hitting well before the All-Star break. He had a good stretch there, and then they went into this 50-50 split. And even now, while, again, d'Arnaud is hitting well, needs to be in the order, he's playing well, and you had been giving him this 50-50 split, although they gave him back-to-back games here earlier this week in the Brewers series. But look, it's nothing against Travis d'Arnaud. Both guys, I think, are good, and d'Arnaud is obviously really hot at the moment, and you got to play that hot hand. But Sean Murphy, I mean, he's supposed to be your guy, and I think he can be that. Maybe this is me just personal bias because I went and got Sean Murphy on a lot of my fantasy teams this year, expecting him to have a big season before he got injured on opening day. It's just I'm a big believer in Sean Murphy, and I think he's your guy. I think you went out to get him to be that guy, and they treat him more like a backup here lately. So, again, Ed's Protect PR say Murphy is the future. He is your guy. And as NP say, a lot of people forget that Murphy missed 2 months on the injured list, and it's hard for a catcher who's going to come back and split time because TDA has to get his at-bats. He is that good, and it's hard for him to get in a rhythm. So, again, I like both catchers. I don't want anybody to sit here and think that I don't like Travis d'Arnaud. It's just kind of the optics of the situation, and the way they treat Sean Murphy worries me because the way they treat him is like a backup. And you go back to that question earlier, then that trade was a mistake, and it does make that trade look like a mistake. So we'll see how, get back to the question from Large Lar. We'll see how Snit handles it. Both guys are hot right now, though. Both guys are getting on base. So who's the hotter hand right now? Obviously, d'Arnaud had the 2 home runs yesterday. He has more hits, but Sean Murphy has more walks. Both guys are getting on base. So, look, I wish one of them could play the outfield. I wish Ozuna could play the outfield. You get both of those guys in there, but only one guy can play catcher, and both of them are playing well at the moment. All right, we got several more questions to get to, including the question about what you do with Soler and Ozuna and Acuna next season. I'll finally get to the title question here next. What is your favorite cold treat when you're at a baseball game? For me, it's ice cream, whether it's finding the Mayfield cart at Truist Park or finding the soft serve, which for me is always difficult to find at Truist Park. I love getting a helmet full of ice cream. When you're taking in America's pastime, don't forget to hydrate with Liquid IV. Popsicles flavor, firecracker flavor is a sure summer hit. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. And look, I can't tell you from personal experience because I did not get to try the samples they sent me because my wife just snatched them from me, and she has been using them because she loves Liquid IV and she loves the lemon lime flavor. That is her favorite. So can't take it from me, but take it from her. Liquid IV is really, really good, and it does exactly what it says it's going to do, giving you great hydration. Just tear, pour, live more. One stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Powered by LIV, Hydroscience, and optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, 8 essential vitamins and nutrients, always non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. All right, got several more questions to get into on today's Mailbag podcast. The next one comes from Double A. Says, this trade deadline to me presented more questions than answers as it pertains to 2025. Do we trade Jorge Soler, Marcell Ozuna to free up the DH spot for Acuna and his health issues? Starting pitching depth is a question with Fried and Morton. Do we go all in to keep Fried, etc.? I don't think they go all in to keep Fried. I think I actually feel much better about the starting rotation going forward, even without Fried and Morton. But obviously would love to have Max Fried back. And I think the injuries concern on him maybe help the Braves a little bit, at least in terms of years. Maybe he does get more of a 4 or 5 year deal rather than what I thought he might get with a 6-year deal. But getting back to, I think the bigger question is, what do you do with the DH outfield situation? Because as things stand now, and Alex Anthopoulos said this the other day, that Acuna is expected to be ready for opening day next season. If you follow him on Instagram, he is working hard to make that happen. So you're going to have an outfield of Kelenic, of Michael Harris, of Acuna. You're going to have Jorge Soler and Marcell Ozuna for the DH and outfield spots. I said this before the trade deadline. I think you go out and get the best bat that helps you for 2024, even if they have team control, and you worry about 2025 in the offseason. But let's fast forward and assume that we're worrying about this in the offseason. What do? You're picking up the option for Marcell Ozuna. That is just a no-brainer. It's $16 million for one of the best DHs in baseball. Very clearly either the first or second best DH in baseball was Shohei Ohtani. That's a no-brainer. You have to pick that up. And then the question becomes, okay, well, then you try to trade one of those guys? If they have tried to get Jorge Soler for 2 years, that tells me they don't care about the DH spot. They just like the bat in Jorge Soler. So I don't think they're all of a sudden going to move him unless that's just talk, which Alex Anthopoulos is usually, pretty open when he speaks. So I don't, what value are you getting for Marcell Ozuna on the trade market? I don't think you're going to get best DH in baseball type of value in return for him. And I think some teams are still going to worry about his character issues that he's had in the past, which, to me on the outside seems to have been cleared up, but I think some teams are going to still worry about that. Here's what I think could happen. If you keep all of these guys, Acuna is going to need time in the DH spot. Obviously, Acuna is going to need days off. And when that happens, you obviously can insert Soler into the lineup. At this point, Jarred Kelenic has not shown me that he can play against lefties every day. So you're looking at a potential platoon situation with Jarred Kelenic. That's going to get Jorge Soler some at bats. Injuries are going to happen. It's just, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. I think there are ways to get Jorge Soler at bats. I do think he is the odd man out with everybody there. It's either him or Jarred Kelenic is what it comes down to. I think Kelenic has shown me enough that he should play, against righties. And you look at the splits for Soler this year, he's much better against lefties than righties. But I think there is, opportunities to get him at bats with Ronald maybe needing some days off here and there, with Kelnick, being still needing a platoon partner for left-handed pitching. I think there's ways to sort it out until, injuries inevitably pop up. So I think there is a situation and a reality where you go into next season with all those guys, and then you just find ways to get them into the lineup. All right, sorry, I got several more questions to get here, and we're running out of time. Jackson Baswell, since we have Soler under control for 2 more years, do you think we should keep him and just let him and Kelnick platoon? And that would probably make us the best outfield in MLB. Thoughts? Kind of what I just talked about. I do think that's probably the plan as of now. Just let him platoon with Kelnick, get him some days in right field when Ronald needs a day off here or there. Find some spots in the DH. I do think there is a world where that makes sense. Caden Hurd, with us signing Jorge, what does this mean for next season in terms of outfield? Does he platoon or we trade him? Already kind of answered that question as well. Brace Battalion, how would you rate the trade for Jorge Soler? I mean, it helps B-, I guess, C+, something like that. I don't love taking on all that future money. And it does, especially as we've talked about, you didn't necessarily have to do that because you have guys for those spots going forward. And now it's going to be a situation where you have to find time for Soler and Kelnick going forward. So it helps the Braves for the rest of 2024. It gives them a much needed guy at the top of their order who can get on base. So in that regard, it's an A or B+. But what it looks like, long term, I think is what kind of brings the trade down a little bit. And maybe that becomes a good thing. Maybe you need that depth. Drew says over the last 3 weeks, Arcia has increased his batting average from 206 to 224. And he's been really good cutting down the strikeouts. Not a question. Just wanted to mention that Arcia has been good, and he has been good here lately. LeBron Thon says, with Fried and Morton both becoming free agents, do you think Elder could work his way back into the rotation for 25? If he's not traded in the offseason, he'll certainly be part of that depth. I don't know that he'll be guaranteed a spot. He'll have to earn a spot going into spring training, but I think he'll be in that mix. And then Drew says, how high in the rotation do you think Schwellenbach is come October? What about the start of next year? I mean, I think this year he gets as high as 4. I think Lopez, Sell, and Fried are still going to be your top 3. But next year, Schwellenbach comes in probably as your number 3 starter. And, I think he's ultimate ceiling is a number 2. That's what I said during the offseason when I was previewing him and talking about him. I think that's his ceiling. But I think for next year, you probably see him slot into that number 3 spot. And Benjamin Walters, why aren't the Braves doing anything with Ken Giles? He quietly has had a decent season in AAA and has had a lot of major league experience. Well, 1, you'd have to open up a 40-man spot for him. And 2, Braves just haven't needed help in the bullpen. There really hasn't been a necessity to bring up a Ken Giles. So even though he's been throwing the ball well, I think he picked up a save the other day for Gwinnett, just honestly haven't needed him because the bullpen is that good. All right, thank you all so much for joining. See Krista Montgomery, Jay Is, E. Baldera, Pedro, Bo Strickland, NP, Robert G., Doug Ebelli, Jessica, New Turbo, Protect PR. Thank you all. Jeff Oliver, thank you so much for joining today's podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of each and every day. Now go make Locked On MLB your second listen of today. Get caught up on everything happening around Major League Baseball. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Braves, though. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't already. Hit that thumbs up button as well. Follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves, and make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.